Hey everybody. So, what is a cursed image? Well, depending on who you ask, you're gonna get a menagerie of answers. A funny image that doesn't quite seem to be real. A disgusting, gross-out picture designed to evoke revulsion. A bizarre occurrence captured on film that causes you to question its existence. A depiction of surreal horror that you feel you shouldn't be seeing. Across the massive breadth of the web, you'll find a vibrant spectrum of answers to this seemingly innocuous question. Not only this, but if you were to somehow travel to the internet of the past, this spectrum of opinions would be vastly different still. So, why? How can this simple idea, represented by these two simple words, evoke such a broad array of interpretations, an array that's evolved greatly over the few years since its inception? The concept of the cursed image is, for all intents and purposes, ubiquitous. It's become so universal that when you heard me say the word at the beginning of this video, you probably had a set of images instantly spring into mind. These images may have seemed to fit so naturally that you wouldn't even realize. Others might just have had a different set. Everyone knows what a cursed image is, until they don't. As it turns out, this discrepancy has its roots in a surprisingly turbulent and grand tale that offers us an insightful and entertaining look into the evolution and dissemination of ideas across the World Wide Web. Sit back and relax, because this is the saga of the cursed image. Now, the first thing to address is the difference between a cursed image and a cursed image. Let me explain. The idea of a cursed image has existed for decades in a literal sense. The idea of a picture being cursed by a demon, spirit, or other malevolent force is a typical horror trope seen even more frequently in modern internet horror like creepypasta. Smile Dog, for instance, is an example of a literal cursed image, a photograph that invokes terrifying hallucinations upon being viewed. But this is not what we're talking about. Somewhere in the last half-decade or so, the term cursed image took on a new, more colloquial meaning. But to understand this new interpretation, we first need to go back to the beginning. The idea of the modern cursed image is believed to have originated on Tumblr around the mid-2010s. It was on Tumblr that we saw the very first centralized hub for cursed images. A Tumblr blog, simply called Cursed Images, was created on October 28th of 2015 with this post: an old man in a wood-walled room surrounded by several tables overflowing with tomatoes. This image may very well have set the entire phenomenon into motion. The account continued to accrue these strange images, and over time, as these images began to spread, a semi-standard definition began to emerge. I'll refer to this as the classic style of cursed image. Essentially, the original guideline for a cursed image was a picture that caused confusion, bewilderment, or on some occasions, distress. Images didn't necessarily have to be disturbing, they just needed to invoke a sense that something was off, or that the scene depicted could only have been created through highly unusual circumstances. A common set of criteria in the classic style was the 5 W's. A cursed image required users to ask who, what, when, where, and why. Alongside this core idea, classic cursed images were often taken with a low-quality camera, often in the dark or with high saturation caused by flash, and multiple layers of confusion revealed upon further inspection of the image. Photoshopped or altered images were almost universally rejected under the classic standards, as were drawn or computer-generated pictures. Additionally, staged images were very often frowned upon, although there were a few exceptions. The general rule of thumb was that you couldn't make a cursed image. They just happened, and it was up to us to seek them out wherever they lurked. The idea of the cursed image, from its inception, began to spread into the various venues of the web. In July of 2016, the legendary Twitter page @CursedImages was created. This account, which posted daily cursed images from its creation date to Halloween of 2016, is often misconstrued as the origin point for the cursed image. However, it was certainly a major player in the popularization of the idea. On September 8th of the same year, the subreddit r/cursedimages was created with the post cursed_img, which ironically was simply a link to a post from the original Tumblr account. From this point onward, the subreddit would serve as one of the major hubs for cursed images throughout the internet. But the saga of the cursed image was only just beginning. Cursed images were not immune to one of the greatest immutable laws of the internet. Everything changes, and very often, the bigger the idea, the greater the change. Cursed images were versatile and flexible enough that they were able to escape the fate of most memes, staying afloat in the public consciousness instead of sinking into the depths of obscurity. But as more and more internet users adopted the cursed image into daily use, the core ideas of the concept were bound to shift. You see, internet communication often acts like a game of telephone, with an idea or definition becoming more and more disconnected from its origin the further it travels. The classic-style cursed image was also a somewhat niche idea. Its core tenets were a somewhat specific matter, and as a classic cursed image couldn't really be created, they were in limited supply. The general populace of the internet accepted the idea of the cursed image, but in a form that was both easier to understand and easier to reproduce. By 2017 and 2018, the cursed image was forever changed. This was the new wave. The new wave of cursed images is a textbook example of how a niche idea can be fundamentally changed when exposed to the greater public. While some of the core ideas of the cursed image were maintained, many others were altered, redesigned, or otherwise ignored. In the new wave definition, the criteria for cursed images were nowhere near as specific and binding as they once were. A cursed image was now simply an image that seemed strange, ironic, bizarre, or otherwise off. And that's about it. The specifications were incredibly broad and left massive room for interpretation, leading new wave cursed images to be of a much greater variety than those in the classic era. Very often these images were more comedic in nature, some leaning more towards memes than actual cursed images. The classic prohibitions on photoshopped and staged images were generally disregarded, as the intent of new wave cursed was not to bewilder, but entertain. As such, the images did not require the same particular spark of uncanniness. Thanks to this, new wave cursed images sprang forth in abundance, quickly surpassing the popularity of the classic cursed image and becoming, for a good time, the prevailing style. Even the embargo on drawn or CG images was lifted, allowing new wave images to further propagate. Instead of being a valuable commodity, rare and sought after, cursed images became something any internet user could create, alter, or distribute. Due to the looseness of the modern criteria, classic and new wave cursed images were sometimes put into the same category, further blurring the lines between these two eras. But this new era could not last forever. Soon, the tides would once again begin to shift. Something not realized until later on was the fact that the core tenets of New Wave Cursed were fundamentally incomplete. Classic-style cursed images were held to a semi-rigorous set of guidelines that ensured a certain level of uniformity. You would see an image and immediately know whether or not it was cursed. However, the looser and more flexible guidelines for New Wave Cursed meant that the exact boundaries for what was and wasn't a cursed image could be stretched depending on who was interpreting. Initially, this was not an issue. Over time, it became one. As the idea grew more and more undefined, more and more internet users began to slap the label of cursed on images that they viewed as such due to limited understanding, confusion, or a number of other factors. An obviously edited image? Cursed. A completely different breed of internet comedy like a deep-fried or surreal meme? Cursed. An image very obviously designed to be nothing more than a joke? Cursed. This misinformed interpretation of the cursed image circulated and spread, and it was only a matter of time before it encroached on the territory still occupied by observers of the classic style. You see, this entire time, the original hubs of the cursed image had still been going strong. Rather than dying out with the change in predominant styles, they surged in popularity. Although the Twitter account had ceased posting in 2016, the Tumblr account, and most notably the subreddit, had continued to accrue cursed image stockpiles. On Reddit, users of the cursed image subreddit began creating spin-off subreddits of increasingly disconnected natures. I admit, even I was guilty of this at points. Blessed images, blurst images, cursed images with an underscore for some reason. These spin-offs further muddied the waters. Along with the growing confusion over what a cursed image really was, this caused what many viewers believed was a rapid and dangerous drop in the quality of the subreddit. Users who had grown accustomed to classic cursed images were disturbed and aggravated by the paradigm shift, and many demanded a return to the origins of the cursed image. Some users tried to raise awareness and reinvigorate the subreddit by posting classic cursed images. Some created splinter subreddits to act as havens for classic cursed images. But none of these efforts were truly effective. That was until... In late 2018, r/cursed images implemented a hardline curation program run by a team of dedicated mods in an effort to enforce the quality of the subreddit and do away with unrelated new wave cursed images. This signaled a new era of the cursed image. While new wave continued to propagate, it was quickly dispelled from the subreddit in favor of revival cursed images, attempting to bring back the original foundations of the classic style. The revival style was fundamentally similar to the classic style in a way that new wave never was. The general feelings of confusion and bewilderment, the 5 Ws, even the emphasis on poorly taken and low-resolution photos. But the styles were not identical. Many users, with the near destruction of the cursed image subreddit fresh in their mind, ended up rebounding a little farther than others. Classic cursed images were not necessarily disturbing, horror-themed, or violent. They could be, and often were, entirely harmless. However, likely in an effort to distance itself from the fast and loose tenets of the new wave, revival cursed images were decidedly more disturbing and grotesque than those of the era they were attempting to return to. Through a sort of rubber band effect, the focus of these images bounded back in the complete opposite direction as new wave. Revival images focused on disturbing figures, horror-related themes, and a general sense of menace to a much greater degree than any style previously seen. Photoshopped, drawn, and computer-generated images were still somewhat accepted, as long as they contributed to the image's menacing feel. This is particularly evident in the subreddit's preoccupation with art by Trevor Henderson, an artist whose hybrid images of disturbing creatures in real-life locales perfectly capture the atmosphere of the revival style. This modern interpretation of the cursed image was certainly closer to their original iteration, but it was very clearly its own unique brand of cursed. But despite being the most recent style, it is not the only one accepted on the internet today. Every time a paradigm shift occurred in the cursed image community, a new branch of the idea was formed. But each time this happened, the previous style didn't exactly die out. Yes, every few years a new interpretation of the cursed image became accepted by millions of internet users, but many users simply did not accept these new interpretations. Due to this effect, there are now 3 or more definitions of what a cursed image really is and what goals it should fulfill. The classic style, focused on confusion and bewilderment, the new wave style, focused on entertainment, and the revival style, focused on feelings of menace. Internet users can subscribe to any of these 3 or more interpretations and still be under the banner of the term cursed image. Thanks to these distinct and clashing schools of thought, the cursed image continues to be a hotly contested and unclear idea. What makes an image cursed? What's cursed and what isn't? Does any one individual have a right to say what cursed really means? Throughout this strange and chaotic history, the answers to these questions have only ever drifted further from our grasp. The truth is, with an idea this broad and a term accepted by so many people, it's impossible to really tamp down a solid definition. After all, it was through this conflict of ideals that these 3 schools of thought and everything in between emerged. What is a cursed image? Ask 1,000 people and you'll get 1,000 different answers. Which is correct?
Well, don't ask me, because I certainly don't know.
We may never truly come to an agreement on the truth about cursed images, but until the day we do, we can take comfort in the fact that we are all taking part in the ongoing saga of the cursed image. Thanks for watching.